wondering how this change in the protocol will affect how human remains are donated to medical schools throughout the state. What will change? How will it change the current protocol?
It simply will have the universities have the ability to apply for the permits that are traditionally applied for by funeral homes.
So it takes the funeral home or the funeral director out of the equation. Is that? And that places the medical school and a functionary in the medical school to provide the necessary information. Is that correct for the filing of permits?
In the process that we're using right now, a person donates their body, the university is able to come pick it up, but they still have to have an a funeral home to provide the permit process. If we remove that funeral home's involvement, the university can provide the permits for himself, and so you're really just removing the middleman from a process. It's not like the funeral home has to come pick the body up and bring it to the university. They don't. They just make a phone call and provide for a permit. If we allow the universities to write the permits themselves, it streamlines the process for the university and, quite frankly, for the person who decided to donate their body to universities.
It sounds like to me that you're putting a middleman in the process rather than taking one out. But in addition to the permit, what kind of a permit are we talking about?
We're talking about the death certificates, transit burial permits for unclaimed cadavers and anatomical gifts without contracting with the funeral home as it is currently required.
So there's more than one permit. There's a burial permit involved, a transit permit, and then a death certificate needs to be signed and filed.
Yes.
How long do they have to file the death certificate? How long? What's the length of time required there?
The time does not change. It would be the same amount of time as they have in the current setup.
So the time remains as it was, as it currently is now?
Yes.
And that's how long?
You probably could answer that question better than I, since you're in the funeral business.
Well, I was just wondering if that was an issue with the medical school, the time transporting the human remains there.
It's not an issue for the medical school. As a matter of fact, we have support letters from the Association of Medical Schools of New York, the Albany Medical College, Hofstra Short Long Island Medical School, Columbia University, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, MSSN, New York State Anthropological Society, New York University Langone Medical Center, School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences at the University of Buffalo, SUNY Upstate, and Cornell Medical School.
So the medical schools support this?
Yes, because they are the beneficiaries of people who allow their bodies to be used for science to help come up with better opportunities to take care of the sick.
Okay. Crystal, what happens to how long does the medical school keep the remains for purposes of dissection and anatomy? Is there and what do they do? This is kind of what do they do following that? There's always something left.
I would assume, Mr. Finch, that they would not change anything that they do right now. The only thing that would change is that they would not have to call, say, Amagon to write and/or call for the certificates and permits that allow the process to move forward.
What's involved in securing the information needed for the, let's say, the death certificate, the first document that needs to be filed? Securing that information, who would do that? Someone for the medical school?
Yes.
And who would that person be? Would it be a doctor, a secretarial person, an administrator?
I believe under the legislation, the medical school, the dean of the medical school would appoint someone whose responsibility will be just to provide those services.
So an administrator or a functionary of sorts would be in charge of filing and filling out this important document.
Yes.
I see. Following that, then there's a transit permit that's required, or a burial permit, or a, what's that document?
It's the same one that that doesn't change. It's just the person who fills it out changes. That's the only thing that changes.
So you're going to be transporting the remains from the place of death, let's say a hospital or nursing home. You need to have a transit permit or a burial permit. But you're not going to make an internment, so you're going to need the transit or removal permit to be filed.
Right. And so what happens right now, and I would suspect this is what happened in my good friend's recent transition, is that the university picked her body up from the ECMC, and they called Amagon Funeral Home to ask them to process the paperwork that they needed to have done for it. So if that happens after this bill is passed, the University of Buffalo Medical School would pick up her body at ECMC, and they would complete the paperwork themselves.
And how would the medical school pick up this human remains? I mean, who would they send? Do they need a vehicle? Is it somewhere close by? How do they do that?
I believe they have the vehicle that they already use. They would use the same one.
They use for what now?
They use an automobile.
But you said they already use.
Because they actually already are able to go and collect the remains. They just are not able to process the paperwork.
I don't think that's accurate. They don't collect the remains or remove the remains or transfer the remains. They don't do that now. But from reading this bill, it looks to me like this gives them the authority to do that. Now, does that mean the hospital is going to have to pick up or purchase a vehicle to do this? They certainly aren't going to transfer human remains in an ambulance that's used for emergency purposes to pick up people who are sick and living. So is that how they're going to do it? Or not? And certainly not an automobile. It won't be an appropriate
vehicle. Well, there is an appropriate automobile. I'm not sure what the name of it is called since I'm not familiar with the funeral home business, but there is an appropriate vehicle that remains are transported in.
And the hospital medical center has one now? They use one? They're not going to use a truck, will they? They wouldn't use a truck.
I'm not sure if the ECMC has one or not. But I am confident that medical schools will not come and collect a body in a vehicle that's inappropriate to put one in.
So they're going to have to purchase some kind of a vehicle or maintain one for the purpose of transporting a dead human remains.
They might already have one.
All right. They already have them?
I said they may already have one.
Okay. What about at the conclusion of when they're through? We'll go back to when they're through doing the dissection, let us say. And how are they going to handle that? What do they do with the final remains? Where do they go?
After they've done what they needed to do for research, I believe they take them to the cemetery.
To the cemetery. And who does that?
Did it say it right in here exactly who does it? I believe it would be the dean of the medical school would have a person within that agency who provides that service.
So the dean of the medical school either goes down to the laboratory and takes the remains and brings it to the cemetery, or directs someone to do that?
Yes, he'll probably identify someone within his staff to handle that issue.
Okay. So this is a whole new kind of ball game for the medical school to do. It's like another aspect of their body donation process then.
Yes, one that they would like to have.
Even though New York State has licensed, trained people to already do this, now we're going to open up the door for medical schools to go in the business of making, let's say, making funeral arrangements, because pretty much that's what we're talking about here.
No, they're not able to make funeral arrangements. This bill does not allow them to do that. And in fact...
Well, it looks to me like the bill does that. It allows some functionary to be able to sign the death certificate. It's a very important document.
No, it just says that they have the ability to file the certificates. It doesn't say anything about making funeral arrangements. As a matter of fact, most people who donate their bodies, they don't have funerals. They have memorial services.
Well, all right. Well, many times memorial service and funeral service are used interchangeably. There's always some sort of, generally speaking, a rite, a ceremony to recognize that a life has been lived. But somewhere along the line, you remove the funeral director. With this particular change in the bill, the scope of practice here.
Well, if I could...
The person, what about the information that goes on that death certificate we're talking about?
What about it?
The dean of the medical school or low-level functionary of the medical school is going to be filling that document out and being responsible for it. What kind of information goes on that, and who files it, and where does it get filed?
Well, I think the first person, particularly if a person dies in a hospital, I'm sure there's a doctor on site who would complete some of that paperwork. But the other issue is that when people, generally, you're having a memorial if there's no body present. If there's a body present, there's a funeral, and you would have to have a funeral home to provide those services. Just in the case that I just mentioned, the family was able to organize a memorial service without the cost of a funeral home because Miss Katie decided to donate her body to science. There was no cost to the family for a funeral at all. And there was no cost to the family, to the university, who came to take her body. And so I think there is a big difference between a memorial service and a funeral service. A funeral service requires the support of a funeral home by law and, quite frankly, by culture. That's the way we operate in this society. But I don't think that if the body has already decided, you can't have a funeral for a body that's been donated. If the body is donated, it has to go right away to where it should be in order for the research to begin.
Let me see if I understand what you said. You can't have a funeral without the body. Is that?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay. What did you say then?
I said that generally in your business, Mr. Finch, funeral homes provide services for people who have a body present. And memorials, particularly in the instance of Miss Katie, who I just attended, who donated her body to the University of Buffalo, there was no body there. There was no funeral home involved at all, with the exception of providing the paperwork that the university needed to begin their process of researching science with the body.
Crystal, thank you very much. On the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Finch.
On the bill?
Clearly, this is not an issue of money or funds or who gets paid for what. But the issue is basically that New York State licenses people for certain things that because they're serious and that they have to be accurate. Whether you're a physician or whatever you are, a professional, this is an important aspect of it. This changes the scope of the funeral director's license. It allows someone, a functionary who we don't even know, to all of a sudden become involved in the process. These documents, and that's just a small part of what we're talking about, have to be accurate, they have to be done professionally, and they need to be done by someone who is trained. This bill, although laudable in many aspects, takes the authority away from the funeral director, the one person that New York State has put in charge. So I'm asking for you to consider this, maybe look at this thing again some other way, and this deserves a no vote. And for that reason and multiple other reasons, I'm asking for a no on this one. Thank you.